Thank you, everyone, and good evening. So I don't have a presentation per se, but I do intend to address the information that was shared from the YouTube, from the video on Facebook, and to provide some information to your listeners, to the listeners on some of the current activity and what it means. So many of you would be familiar with the video, and what it did show is people in the crater of Lemega with the hot spring, with the hot spring areas and showing the bubbling and so on. Now, as Mr. Samuel indicated, every volcano that can erupt again, we consider live to be live. I know many of you are familiar with the word dormant. That is something that, as we learn more about volcanoes, we learn new terminologies and things that are phased out of use. So dormant is actually one word. When I was in school, I used that word. But scientists are now trying to get away from the word dormant, because not because it's wrong, but more so that it gives people a false sense of the volcano not being able to do anything, that it's dead. So people often mix up dormant with dead. So we tend to stay away from the use of the word dormant, more recently. So Lemega is considered live, and that means that it has the potential to erupt again in the future. And I think Mr. Samuel summed it up very well in his presentation, where he showed that a volcano is considered live when we look for certain signs. And those signs are seismic activity that are associated with the volcano. And how we see that is we detect the earthquakes, and they're located beneath the volcano and around the volcano. And this is what, as he indicated before, some of the signs that we saw with Soufriere and Vincent. The other sign of activity, or that a volcano is live, is the deformation, as he mentioned, and this is the swelling, because as fluids, and this could be either magma or gas, rise or beneath the volcano, it causes the volcano to swell like a balloon. And with the ground deformation network, that is able to detect these changes in the shape of the volcano, and it allows us to see whether or not that is happening. And the other tool is the geochemistry, which is the thing that I think is most of interest right now, in that we look at the changes in the gas and the water chemistry. And actually, that's something that I do at Seismic. The activity that was seen in Lemega is normal. It's not unusual. It does not look any different to what has been seen in the past, in terms of how the feature looks and the type of activity that's associated with these features that are in the crater. As a matter of fact, in other volcanoes or volcanic areas such as Dominica and St. Lucia, you would see even more, I don't want to say violent, but more effusive activity associated with their hot springs and fumaroles that would actually look a lot more active than what was seen in the video for the Mount Lemega features. But at the same time, we must be aware that it is a live volcano, and there are safety concerns with people going in and not being able to get out, because, as was mentioned by Dr. Brown in his update on the umbrella, it is a challenging, physically challenging hike, and there is a risk of injury. But just to note that what is to go back to the question about what is a geothermal system, and why does it show these signs at the surface? So what happens is, yes, there is magma at depth beneath the volcano. What happens is it heats the rock above it. So this hot rock is there, and then you have water coming in from the rain that filters through the cracks and so on the volcano, and it percolates down into the earth, and it's heated by the hot rock. the magma itself also degasses. So there's gas associated with it. And together with that hot water that's heated up and boils, that comes up to the surface and is manifested as the hot springs and the vents and ephemerals that we all keep referring to and hearing these words. So this is something that's seen in most volcanic systems. And of course, when a volcanic system becomes more active, you will tend to see changes in the activity as well as the appearance of these features. And this is not what is happening at Leomega. So the other thing is seismicity wise, I think we need to kind of understand that there are two types of two types of earthquakes. There are what we call tectonic earthquakes, and this is associated. We live in the Caribbean, and we live in a subduction zone setting, and that as the plate moves, meaning the North American plate, as you all know, are being maybe aware, is being subducted beneath the Caribbean plate, and this gives rise to the volcanoes in the arc that creates the volcanic islands of the arc, and it also is responsible for the earthquakes, the big earthquakes that we feel, the tectonic earthquakes. So this is when the plates slip, and it doesn't slip very smoothly. It slips, as pressure builds up. It's jagged rocks. So when they slide past one another, and that sliding is not smooth, it creates these earthquakes, and that's tectonic earthquakes. But many of you who are following the La Soufrière event eruption would become a little more familiar with the other types of earthquakes which are associated with volcanoes. And namely, these are long period earthquakes. There's long period, there's the tremor that we talk about, and there's volcanic earthquakes or VTs, volcano tectonic earthquakes. So the volcano tectonic earthquakes, that's the first sign that we would start looking for. And these have specific signals that we would, or seismologists would be able to interpret. And the volcano tectonic earthquakes, these are the ones that are generated when magma is trying to find a pathway. So what it does is it breaks the rock up above it. And this breaking and fracturing of the rock generates a certain signal. And this is seen as VT earthquakes or volcano tectonic earthquakes. And then when that pathway is created, then that fluid, the fluid magma and the fluid gas, is able to move a bit more freely through the volcanic plumbing system. And that is seen as what we call the long period earthquakes. So think of it like a straw, and the vibrations that the liquid, whatever you're drinking, makes when it contacts the sides of the straw, that generates a signal, and that's similar to what we see when we see the long period earthquakes, and that's an indication that magma is moving closer to the surface. And these are the type of information that we used to help. And now to go back to another thing, we cannot predict volcanic eruptions. What we do is provide forecasts and warnings. So in terms of the actual date, place, and time, that is not something that can accurately be predicted. There is some level of uncertainty, but our aim is to provide enough warning to be able to, as Mr. Samuel and everybody has indicated, to try to save lives and to allow evacuation of people if necessary to avoid harm. So with respect to that video, if we go back again, the type of activity that was seen is a normal hydrothermal activity. It was not unusual for Leomega, and it does not indicate that there is an increase in the activity of the volcano. The other concern that people often say is that when one volcano erupts in our region, it's linked to other volcanoes, and other volcanoes can show unrest. That again is not true. The processes the processes throughout the region that actually allow for the formation of the volcanoes, that's the same. Yes, it means that we are in a subduction zone, as I mentioned before, and this is what allows the formation of volcanic islands. But in terms of the plumbing systems of the volcanoes being linked, No, each volcano is different and has its own plumbing system, and one activity at one does not necessarily allow for another one to increase in activity or erupt. So I hope that this addresses some of the concerns that you may have. There is a lot of information being provided on our social media platforms, the Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. And if you have any questions, you can certainly email us as well, or send a note in any of those social media platforms. We can answer them. But utilizing the eruption at La Soufrière, we've tried to share as much information so that the public are aware of these terms and can understand what is happening. And I think one of the key things that Mr. Samuel said was preparation. So this is not meant to scare anyone, but we all live in volcanic islands, and we use them. We use them for recreation. We utilize the resources that they provide, tourism and other things, the forest, the plants, the trees, etc. But we must also be aware that there are associated hazards with them, and preparation is the key. So knowing where you live, knowing which zone you are located in, the evacuation routes, ensure that you listen to the official sources of information, such as the NEOC, the Disaster Agency of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as the Seismic Research Center, the monitoring agency for St. Kitts and Nevis. So hopefully this information may be of assistance.